technical session number 27. We're going to be talking about installing and configuring mobile device connectivity. These mobile devices are wonderful, they're awesome, they're amazing, but what really makes them valuable to us is their ability to connect to the internet. So we want to talk a little bit more about why that is valuable to connecting these devices to your networks, and talk about some commonly used devices and how to get them up and running on your networks. We're also going to name the steps to installing and configuring a network connection, and describe how to enable Bluetooth and pair a Bluetooth device to a mobile network. There is a step in here that always happens, but we never see it. And we need to be aware of that step with regards to A+. So we will talk about that though as we go along. Like yesterday's BSMs, ours for today again are adaptability and future orientation. We need to be able to change and maneuver our point of view, our understanding today so that we can still be successful, and we need to also understand that our actions today will affect our outcomes that we have for our goals. And right now, everybody here has that common goal. We want to see certifications on the board by the time we are complete with this course. You know, because we are looking for career changes, we want to get into a new field or become more knowledgeable in the field we are already in. So we'll talk about a kind of an overview of mobile network connections. Typically, you're using radio transmitters and receivers that are technologically advanced in order to communicate with said networks. Cell phones use what is called baseband radio processor that is responsible for creating a wireless network interface and is used to handle the basic communications with your mobile provider. How many of you knew that you actually have 2 operating systems running on your phone simultaneously? Not 1, 2. So you have the one that you primarily interface with, which is your smartphone, you know, like your iOS or your Android or whatever, but you also have one that runs in the background, and that's the one that communicates with your mobile provider. That one we almost never interact with. It is updated behind the scenes and usually operates in a way that is kind of, you know, beyond our need to interact with. We just get the benefits of it being able to communicate with towers, which towers, you know, are on our network, which towers are partners with our network, you know, things like that. So mobile devices provide pretty awesome functionality when you're connected to a network, because, you know, there's those life-altering questions like, what was that movie with Kevin Bacon back in the 80s where he was in that small town and they wouldn't allow dancing? You know, if we were just dying to have that question answered, then, you know, we're now to, there you go. We're able to connect to the internet and go get that answer. So 2 types of network can be used to gain access to the internet via your cell phone for the most part. There are some slight exceptions, but these are essentially the rule. You have your cell phone network, which you have 4G LTE, which means long-term evolution, and G does not have to do with speed, it has to do with generation. So you have 1G, 2G, because you hear people talking about 5G, that it is a different generation of phone. And some of the capabilities that should come along with that. There's going to be certain things that they will look for it to be considered in that generation. And that's what the G stands for in this situation. And the LTE just means long-term evolution. So that would be your cell phone network. And then the other way, which we will get into in more detail in a later T session, is your Wi-Fi network, which operates off of the 802.11 standard. And you will get to know many flavors of this standard as we go through this course when we talk about SOHO routers. So this is the two different ways primarily that your device communicates with the network as a whole. All right. In order to communicate with the Wi-Fi network, you need to enable or disable the Wi-Fi on a mobile device. So on an iPhone, it's called Wi-Fi. Android, it's called wireless networks. I'm guessing that has to do with copywriting of terms, but this is the ones they use. So when enabled, you will see all the Wi-Fi networks within range. If they're open networks, you'll see an unlocked padlock. If they are locked and you have to have what's called an SSID and password, they have a little padlock is locked. So to set up the connection, you need to select the one that you wish to connect to. And if it requires a password, you'll need to provide the password at that time. The network name, what they call the network, is called the SSID, or Service Set Identifier. Just a fancy way of saying the network's name. Hopefully none of you are walking around looking for unsecure networks to get on, because I so hope you didn't raise your hand there, DW.
No, I don't do it anymore, but when I was a struggling college student, I would definitely scan the entire buildings. I would get upset when certain networks wouldn't come on. I would go to McDonald's to do homework.
But after going through our security systems, you're like, oh, this was bad.
No, not anymore. Well, after we did security, I actually locked my network down.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, I have a password. That's good enough, but it's not. You gotta hide it. You gotta do.
Yeah, there's a variety of things that we need to do to protect our networks, like we talked about yesterday. Security operates in layers. And an interesting way to say it is you don't have to be Fort Knox. You just have to be a less appealing target than your neighbor. It's kind of how home security works in large part. You don't have to have like 15-foot walls, bars on every window, 50 guard dogs running around the perimeter of the house. No, you really have to be a less appealing target than your neighbor, because they won't want to walk into an unknown situation when they can walk into a known situation. Same thing operates with cybersecurity on the net. Although if you have extreme security, some people may assume that you have a lot of really good stuff that you're hiding, and will go out of their way to try to breach that security just for the sake that they think there's something extremely valuable on the other side. All right. Now, cellular networks. Our ability to connect to a cellular network happens automatically for the most part, as long as the phone has an active line SIM card with the cellular provider. So that works for the phone aspect of it. As far as data, you can toggle on or off the cellular data in your settings. Sometimes this can get turned off by accident. It needs to be turned back on. And it can be done through your phone settings as well. One generic example of the settings steps you would go through, you go to your settings, wireless, mobile, and then enable data. Each one of these arrows, this is called essentially a map, or a path is another term they'll use for it. So each arrow is the next button you will click in your process. So you have settings, wireless, mobile, enable data. Somebody may go on a trip, and if they're running out of cellular data, turn off their cell data, and then later come home, forget they have done this, and then they're unable to utilize that at all, and they'll call in for help to see if you can figure out what's going on. This would be your first step to check. The other thing would be airplane mode. Make sure that's turned off as well. All right, here's some cellular features that you may or may not have. Hotspot is a big one. Depending on your service provider, they may or may not allow this function. My service provider will not allow this because I have unlimited data. And I got in on that one really early. And so we're grandfathered in at a very low rate on unlimited data. So they will not allow us to do this because that means we'll have multiple devices hooked up and use even more data. Tethering, we talked about this yesterday, where you would do, it's typically viewed as a direct connection. You use your lightning cable and then hook it up to your USB on your computer, and you can share your cell service with, your computer if you so choose. Airplane mode turns off all radio transmissions. So it turns off Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular. So the three things that it turns off when you put on airplane mode. Interestingly, coincides with what the airlines ask you to turn off when you get onto the airplane. Bluetooth, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in later sessions, but it is essentially a short range communication for, short bits of data, but is improving drastically. I think we can get up to 10 meters out of it with regards to the A+, but now I think they can get up to close to 50 meters and actually provide power through the Bluetooth wireless for devices. It's kind of incredible what they're able to do with it now. Cellular, your cell phone updates through what is called baseband radio firmware. And then we will get into the IMEI versus IMSI, which is basically like the social security number for your cell phone, and then the identifier or security number for your SIM card. And then we'll talk briefly about VPNs or virtual private networks, which we will get into in more detail as we start talking about security as well.
Somebody asks, can a cell tower pick up your location while on airplane mode?
Can what?
She asks if a cell tower can pick up your location when on airplane mode. I don't think it can in airplane.
No, because you've turned off all cellular communications on that device. That doesn't mean that the GPS may not work. So you can have airplane mode on to where none of your radio transmitters are on, but your GPS can still pick up your location.
This is where Karen would come in with a CSI.
I know, right? She goes, no, I watched this one special where they caught this guy. She was great in cybersecurity, man. So mobile hotspot lets you share your cellular internet with other connected Wi-Fi enabled devices. If you have this set up, it will be in the settings on your phone. If you turn it on, you can set your own SSID and password to be able to log on to this network. I highly encourage you do this and still make it a complicated password, because there are people out there that are roaming around looking for open internet access just to be able to use it. So if you're like an airport or something like that, especially where cell service is kind of at a premium, people don't want to use their cell service. They don't want to pay for the Wi-Fi at the airport, but they see an unsecured network close to them. They may just log on and piggyback on your network, killing your bandwidth. So this is something that you want to be able to pay attention to as well. So again, it's that extra layer of security. So the downside for using your hotspot is it's slow. And the more devices you connect to it, the more fractions you're creating with your network. So you only have a certain amount of bandwidth, and then you're starting to divide it up amongst other devices. So it slows down really quickly. If you do not have an unlimited data plan, you need to be very cautious about the level of data you're using, because you can chew through your data really quickly utilizing something like this. So it's something you want to be able to be aware of. That way you're not spending extra money on your cell service. And the other one, security wise, there is no additional security beyond a password to connect. So you are opening yourself up to pretty relatively simple attacks to get past your security. So that is another one you got to be aware of. Now, that's for hotspots that are on phones. There actually are hotspots that are standalone devices. Verizon used to sell one. It looked like a little square brick, and they called it a jetpack. And it basically just had like one button on it. You turned it on. It had a SSID and password, and then you could link to it, and you were connected to the network. My old company used to use these, and would actually only allow your VPN to work if you're on your home network at your house or using the jetpack if you were using your computer away from the office. So whatever you designated as your home network and the jetpack, you could not connect to like Starbucks or McDonald's or your friend's network and log in through the VPN. It would instantly block it security wise. You had to use this hotspot or your home network. Questions so far? All right. Airplane mode. As we talked about a little bit earlier, it disconnects all of your radio communications, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular. And obviously this is when you use when you fly, or if there are times when you do not wish to be disturbed, things like that. Some of these things should be off at all times unless you are using them. Bluetooth is one of those things because unfortunately the security on Bluetooth is not great. There are pretty easy ways to bypass it, and there's 3 primary attacks called blue sniffing, blue snarfing, and blue jacking, and that gets you to various levels of penetration into your device, from just being able to view your data all the way down to full control of that device. So also, here's a question that comes up a lot, because this also happens on laptops. Laptops also have an airplane mode where they will not communicate with Wi-Fi as well. If you're in a scenario where somebody had just got back from a business trip, and now all of a sudden their laptop cannot communicate or get online when they're at the office, you need to make sure airplane mode has been turned off, because many people forget that laptops themselves have an airplane mode. So you need to make sure that that is turned off so that they can actually access the Wi-Fi networks. Otherwise, that will be blocked. Same thing with cell phones. If you're on a plane for any given time, then you get off, and you're all of a sudden trying to make calls and stuff like that, and none of that stuff seems to be working. It's likely that airplane mode is still active. When it is enabled, thankfully, they give us this fun little airplane icon up in the corner, usually. Just like if you had the do not disturb, gives you the little moon icon, at least it does for me. I mean, you don't want any texts or phone calls or anything inbound, but you can still make outbound communications. Now, there are some modifications to airplane mode where you can turn it on, and then you can individually go in and turn specific things on. Like you can turn airplane mode on, and then you can go back and turn on Wi-Fi. That'll still leave your cellular and your Bluetooth off, but you'll still be able to connect to the Wi-Fi. Or you could do it with Bluetooth. Like you could leave your cellular and your Wi-Fi off, turn on your Bluetooth, and then be able to enable your headphones and listen to your music or what have you. Oh, we get to have the history lesson about Bloodfire. Pause it. So Bluetooth, short range wireless technology, IEEE 802.15 is the standard. Do you need to know that, the IEEE for A+? No. If you're going to continue on with certifications after the A+, which I hope many of you do, yes, you do need to know that, because the 802 standards are all of your networking standards. .11 is going to be your Wi-Fi or wireless standards. 802.15 is your Bluetooth standards. There's a whole list of them. There's like 100 of them. And all this is basically just binders full of information as to what are the qualifications to be a part of this standard, what are the capabilities, and, you know, especially with regards to generations and what they're able to do. So that's when you see the IEEE 802 dot whatever, that's all it is just the information based upon that standard. When you connect two devices together, be it your phone or your computer or your car or your headset or whatever, this is called pairing. Here's a quick breakdown on it. If you're an Android fan, you got to know how to do it on a Apple device. If you're an Apple fan, you got to know how to do it on an Android device. So on Androids, from the home screen, you select the menu button. From the menu, you go to your settings, wireless and networks, and then you click on Bluetooth, and then you look for your device in the Bluetooth. Once it's selected, wait until a check mark appears next to Bluetooth, and Bluetooth is now enabled. Although there is a step that they're missing here, but we will get into that. On the Apple device, on the main page, choose settings, go to general, Bluetooth. Once that is on, you turn the slider on, and that enables your Bluetooth device for you to be able to search for the item you wish to pair. So here is the pairing steps. So first you have to enable pairing so that the device starts transmitting a signal. Once it is transmitting the signal, you would look on your main or primary device, and you would look for, you make sure your Bluetooth is enabled, and then it will start scanning, looking for Bluetooth devices that are transmitting close by. Once you see your device show up in your menu, whatever device you're trying to pair, be it a headset or keyboard or what have you, you would then select that device by tapping it. Here's the step that you don't normally see. You need to enter an appropriate PIN code. If you've ever paired with a car, this might be something that you're familiar with, because the car will put up the PIN code so that you can put in that PIN, and it can then connect. However, most devices just have a generic PIN of 0000. So what happens is when your primary device is trying to connect to it, it instantly puts in that 40 PIN to see if that works. If that works, it goes ahead through, tests the communication, and then you'll get your headset is connected. But we have to remember that step still exists. So there is still an exchange of a PIN, even though we don't see it. And for devices that are going to be looking for a little bit better security, or your car, they may have a different PIN, like it may say like 5273. Questions on that? All right. Cellular updates, baseband or radio firmware. So radio firmware, which is that operating system that operates behind the operating system that you normally interact with, it manages all of your wireless communications. It has its own firmware and memory established for itself. It runs what is called a real-time operating system, so that everything happens as quickly as it can. Because when we're on a conversation on the phone, we don't want to hear delays. We want to hear that information instantaneously, right? you know, because if you've ever been on a conversation with somebody, you know, like if you've ever done a Zoom call or somebody with a satellite connection where there's like a 3-second delay, that can seem like an eternity trying to have a conversation with that person every time you have that delay in the talk. We had a TA worked with us who had satellite. There was about a 2 to 3 second delay. And it was comical a lot of the times because like a joke would be told, everybody would laugh and move on. And then finally the communication would get to him. And then he would laugh like a few seconds later. So it was like, you know, it took him a while to get the joke, but it was just because he was on satellite. So the baseband or real-time operating system operates in a manner so we don't experience this. We may have, you know, the sound cut out every now and again, but there's not really a delay in that communication. All of your updates for your baseband, as they're updating security protocols and communication protocols and all that stuff, happens what is called OTA, or over the air. So it is pushed to your device over the cell towers. You will almost never see or interact with this. It's all happening behind the scenes. And the nice thing about it is it kind of keeps your phone up to date with all the current lists of the towers it's allowed to communicate with and all the latest details and protocols for communication. Questions so far? They don't go into super detail in this in the book. We just mostly need to have a definitional understanding of it and that it's there with regards to the A+. All right, so should you want to do this, you are able to access some of the radio firmware updates on Android if you wish. You can download the radio zip file from your provider and rename it to update zip, and then copy it to the root of the phone's SD card. Turn off the phone, start the phone in recovery mode by holding the home and pressing power at the same time. And then you press Alt-S to apply the updates. And then once this is done, press home plus back to reboot the phone, and then the phone will boot up again and continue applying the updates. Once this is done, the recovery menu will ask you for the second time if you want to reboot the phone via the home back buttons. After that, you can double check, make sure your baseband has been updated by going into your settings in your menu, look at your phone, and then check the version of the baseband that you're using to make sure it's updated to the more current version. So if you want to force an update, this would be one way to do it. Although this falls into the almost never happens category. Especially currently. Now, if you're gonna, go the route of say creating your own Linux phone or something like that, you want to get out of those silos of the Google, Apple ecospheres and set off on your own. Yes, this is something you may have to do on a regular basis. All right, firmware updates in iOS. After downloading the desired firmware, connect the device to the computer to select it in iTunes. Mac users hold down the Option key, Windows hold down the Shift key. Then you click the Update or Restore button, and then you select your IPSW file that you downloaded to click Choose, and your device should now begin its updating process. And then you take note, certain browsers might change the file type, and then you need to rename it back to its original type so that iTunes will recognize it. All right, cellular updates. Talk about PRI, which is product release information. This is the connection between your mobile device and the radio, essentially, and it needs to kind of be updated from time to time to add features or increase your data speeds and stuff like that. Although it always seems like every update they give us slows down our data speeds. I don't know why that is, you know. But if this is gonna, you know, when these come across, they happen OTA or over the air. The update is a flash process, and when done manually, the bootloader is used to perform the flash process. And if it's indirect, the device can become useless if it is interrupted. Much like we were talking about flashing the BIOS on your motherboard, if that process becomes interrupted for any reason, it becomes a brick. Same thing can happen with the PRI updates if they're interrupted in any manner. In theory, though, it should add security, it should add features, and hopefully speed to your data transfer rates. Questions so far? Next, we get to PRL. So we have PRI, which is product release information. And then we have PRL, which is preferred roaming list, which pretty much is what it says it is. It's a list of radio frequencies residing in the memory of the phones to use on the networks. The dominant networks in the US at this time were Verizon and Sprint. The updates to this list also occur over the air, and it contains information about the radio bands, subbands, and your service provider. And they need to be updated inside your phone on a pretty regular basis. And it makes sure that your phone is able to connect to the right towers on your mobile network, especially if you travel a lot. This is a big deal. So just remember the difference in the acronyms: your product release information versus your preferred roaming list. Depending on your device, there's a few different ways you can access the or update the PRL. Through your settings, system updates, you can go ahead and activate PRL. In iOS, there is no separate PRL update command on the iOS, but you can run a profile update, which will force this to happen in the process. I think T-Mobile piggybacks off of other networks, so that's where the PRL would come in for them. Oscar, if I'm not mistaken with them. It's like many of your smaller providers piggyback off of larger cellular company networks. They have carrier agreements or memorandums of understanding, business agreements.
I think T-Mobile actually got their own now, because I think they're like the second biggest network or third behind AT&T. And
okay, so they started building up. So I think at the time these were the two biggest, Verizon and Sprint.
Yeah,
well, T-Mobile they were focusing on.
Yeah, T-Mobile bought Sprint.
Right.
Well, then there you go. So they inherited all that infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, information we have is based upon the time in which it was created.
No, I'm just a T-Mobile fan. That's why I know this.
Okay.
My first
don't ever move to Montana then.
But then they bought Sprint.
All right. All right, IMEI versus IMSI. Understanding the distinction between these two is important. So IMEI is the International Mobile Equipment Identification. So the E is the important part in this acronym here. And it is a serial number that is unique to each and every phone, and it is used to identify that physical phone from any other device. The beautiful thing is if you have this number recorded in another place, say your phone gets stolen, you can give that IMEI number to your provider and they can send a signal to it and brick that device, which means they can't access your information, and whoever stole it probably won't be able to sell it at that point. So that is the IMEI number. It's on the back of every phone. I think some of them, they'll be under, like if you could remove the battery from it, it's underneath the battery. But every phone has this number on the back of it. And that is going to be separate from the IMSI, which is the International Mobile Subscriber Identification Number. And that is a unique 15-digit number used to identify the Subscriber Identification Module, or SIM card, that is in your phone. So the IMSI identifies your SIM card, the IMEI identifies your phone. So if you need to move from one phone to another, you can pop the SIM card out of one, put it into another phone, and it works. Your service provider recognizes that SIM card, knows that it's you, you're up to date, and it goes ahead and allows you access. Yeah, out of the new phones, I don't think you can remove the batteries, but the old phones where you can still pop them out, they would have the IMEI number on the back of it or underneath the battery. So good thing to have. Take your IMEI number and put it down in another location outside of your phone. Just in case something happens to your phone, you can shut it down and they won't be able to access your personal data.
Excuse me, sir. May I know where we can find that number?
Should be in the back of your phone.
You can also find it in most phones. If you go about phone or about, you
That's
can
in the
find
settings.
it yeah, settings.
Okay, sir. Thank
You could take a screenshot of it and email it to yourself or something.
Yeah.
you.
That way you'll have that information on file. It's just a security precaution.
Mr. Kelly, I have a question.
Yes, Cedric.
Okay, does the SIM card has to be in the phone before trying to get off the phone, or it doesn't matter if I have the EIM number?
With the IMEI number? No, the SIM card has nothing to do with the IMEI number.
I got to tell you something, Kelly. I've been involved in this one for a little bit, and in order for the carrier to send that signal, it actually has to be in there first.
Okay.
Before you take it out. So if somebody gets your phone and they take out a SIM card real quick, and they, like, for example, that carrier can only lock it for their network. So AT&T, you no longer can access AT&T without IME. But if you go to another country or you go to another provider, you can actually utilize that phone there. Unless well, I should say another country, because I believe that here they share that communication between the multiple carriers for that carry. Like, well, at the time it was only GSM that were able to do that with the SIM cards, taking the SIM cards out, and at the time it was only what are the two DW we just mentioned before T-Mobile came here?
Oh, about AT&T and Verizon.
AT&T and Verizon were the only two at the time, and then T-Mobile came, but a lot of phones from Europe had that issue.
But the counter argument to that is the most valuable part about the phone is not necessarily the phone itself. The sale of the phone, the selling of the phone is an afterthought, or that last little cherry on top. The most valuable information is your banking information, your access to your credit cards, all that fun stuff, because a lot of people have that access in their phone, and they save their passwords. So as long as they can get into the phone, they have access to everything. So the true value is the data. So that gives you the time you need to be able to shut down that device.
True.
That's the counter I have to that argument. But I see where you're saying, where if they yank it out, then the network can't hit it and, you know, basically give it that poison pill.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that race against time. Like if, you know, you drop your wallet, between you shutting off your cards and them hitting as many places as they can before it gets shut off. You know, same thing with the
Yeah,
software.
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how I would put it. Yeah, that sounds right.
So the moment it happens, it becomes a race. So.
Well, yeah, Oscar, I was just saying, like, if you go to, well, you know, from the Caribbean, so if you go to the Caribbean, and you can utilize that same block phone there, and I know a lot of those people utilize, you know, those phones. So that's the only reason why I say I know that part.
In theory, right? In theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Allegedly.
Is this recorded? Did you pause?
Allegedly, I know people that did this. But yeah, no, understand the distinction between the IMEI and the IMSI. The E is for equipment, which is linked to the phone itself. The S is for the subscriber identification, which is the SIM card subscriber identification module. Who thought it was short for simulation? Come on, be honest. Nobody? I was the only one? Man, that's hurtful. All right. Hotspot. We briefly talked about you being able to share with everybody else, or, you know, hopefully just, you know, the devices that you want. But we talked about the lack of security. So the devices you're using need to have some additional security attached to them. One of the primary ways we can do this is by encrypting our data. And one of the easiest ways we can do that is through what is called a virtual private network, which encrypts our data over transmission and can also obscure our location. So that, you know, people like Google or Facebook or whatever, it makes them a lot harder for them to actually collect data on us. Now, I'm not sure if many of you know this, but there are some recent court cases that have gone through federal courts that basically state that law enforcement can go to internet providers and request your data without a warrant, and they will just hand it over. And so long as you are not using any form of security or encryption, if you're not using a VPN or some way to obscure or encrypt your data, the courts have ruled that there is no assumption of privacy. So if you are not using any security measures, they can quite literally go and request all your data, no warrants, no probable cause, and the internet providers will just hand it over.
And what if you do use a VPN?
Then there is an assumption of privacy, and warrants would be required at that point. So if you're using some form of encrypting technology, you know, or something like that to obscure or protect your data, there is an assumption of privacy because you're making steps to, you know, in that sense. Yes, choose your VPN provider wisely. That is an excellent point. NordVPN was a big one in the last couple of years because they ended up getting hacked, and then it came to light that they didn't wipe their servers on a regular basis. So all their clients' private information was all there. So yes, and we'll talk about it in security, but there's certain VPNs that do what's called a half tunnel. So only half the data is encrypted, the other half is not. So that essentially still opens you up to these court cases where there's no assumption of privacy. And they do this because it allows for greater speed, because encrypting data takes processing power and can slow down your communications.
Your recommendation?
I mean, there's a few of them out there. I just say, you know, like Norton has a pretty, like Norton 360, there's a good one. ExpressVPN's another one. There's a few of them other, just you do your research, you know, like do some basic research on the company, see if they've been involved in any hackings, if there's been any issues with them, you know, like Oscar's saying, they'll hand over your logs if requested. So you're looking for ones that are going to essentially wipe their logs on a daily basis, sometimes even hourly. You know, you want to see like what data they keep on you, how big their server networks are, stuff like that. So, you know, you want to, you know, do some basic research. After this course, you'll be a little better equipped for that. But that's kind of where we are. Megabyte, was it Malware Bytes has a good product now? Okay. I'm not familiar with them. So just a PSA, if you're not encrypting your data, there is no assumption of privacy, and anybody who wants your data can just ask for it and get it. All right, so establishing a VPN on your Android, relatively simple. Go into your settings, wireless networks, tap the more button, and then you scroll down, you'll get a VPN option. You can tap on it, and then on the wireless and add, wireless and networks, and then you would tap the plus button to provide the VPN details, because you need to let it know which VPN you wish to use. Enter the name for the connection, select the type of VPN server you're connecting to, and then enter the server address itself. On Apple devices, it's under settings, general, and then you scroll down to VPN. At that point, you just click add VPN, and then you provide your VPN details at that point, and you're up and running. Some of them make it pretty easy. They have built-in apps where you can select which servers. This allows you to unlock regionally locked content. Like if you're a Netflix fan, the Netflix options you have here in the US would be very different than you would have if you're in Canada. If you're an anime fan, if you're in South Korea, your anime options are going to be very different than they are here in the US. So it's one of those things where you can make it appear as if you're in different regions of the world, and that actually unlocks certain things and locks certain things, because they're able to censor or block certain things based on where you're located. I wouldn't trust a free VPN, Joyce. Remember what we said in day one? If it's free, you're the product. That is hands down going to be the most likely person to hand over your data if requested. Not just to, you know, law enforcement, but to advertisers and data miners and all that stuff. That's how they're going to make their money, is by selling your information. So anything like, you know, VPNs and malware, anti-malware stuff, I try to avoid the free. And they are pretty inexpensive, Oscar. You know, you are correct. It could be just like a couple dollars a month, like $2, $3 a month, if you find a decent one. Don't need to spend a ton of money on it. But you look for one that's going to allow you to add it to like multiple devices, because you can put them on your, you know, they have VPNs on your TVs. You know, so like you can put them on, you know, like your Amazon Fire Sticks, your smart TVs, any network connected device almost you can attach a VPN to. So you want one that's going to have unlimited devices, so you can add it to all the ones you have in your household. Yep, we just talked about that. You can get a VPN address from another company or country. So like I can make myself appear as if I'm in Europe or, you know, Africa or Latin America or Asia. You know, if that company has servers there, because what I do is I go into their network as close to me as I can. And then where I pop out is where they view me. So where I'm coming out of their server network, which could be in Brazil, my IP number would be based as if I was in Brazil. All my location services would be based as if I was in Brazil. So yeah, wherever you pop out of their network, that is where you'll be viewed as where you are at. And most have servers all over the world. And
Can I just ask you something, Kelly, that I meant to bring up, but you're on topic about it now?
What's that?
I was seeing like a innovation thing where they have like physical VPN things now, where it's like it looks almost like the Ethernet overpowered, like an adapter like that, and you plug in your modem into that, and then that way, like things that are running on your computer don't pick up that you're running a VPN software.
Interesting. So they have a physical device that can create that tunnel for you.
Yeah,
I like that. I had not seen those yet, but that is really cool, and it does make sense. It's kind of like the physical tokens versus a software token. So I do kind of like that concept, and it makes sense, especially if you can have one of those set up to be a direct link to your company. The only downfall of it would be is if it's not a way to password protect it. If somebody can get their hands on that device and you use that to access your company, that could be a huge security risk. So there needs to be a way to, like a gateway of some sort, to be able to get through it.
I think they
would be my only thing.
Yeah, I think they use like crypto encryption for it.
So. Okay. Yeah, they're putting on the USGs now on the firewalls.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's actually inside a security device, so it does have that encryption.
Well, on the company side, yeah, it makes sense. I'm speaking more on the private side at home. Like
I have one at home.
Okay.
But it's for my home. Like, so it's a USG. Ubiquiti has a good amount of those products now. The Dream, you will when you Google some of that stuff, you'll see some.
Okay.
Of the
yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that. I hadn't heard that they. I mean, I knew they were incorporated in like, you know, some firewalls and stuff like that for organizations. I did not know they actually had physical devices that they were selling out to, you know, private users.
I found that pretty interesting.
That's pretty cool. Thank you. That's neat, EW. I appreciate that. And Greg for the information on it. All right. Well, with that, we're kind of wrapping up here. We should now be able to explain the value of connecting mobile devices to a network. As the meme goes, what is something you could tell somebody from 100 years ago that would absolutely shock them? And it's, you know, I hold in my pocket a device that has access to the summation of all human knowledge. Well, that's wonderful. And I use it to watch cat videos and yell at people on the internet. So also, we should now be able to name the steps to configuring a network connection, and then describe and enable and pair a Bluetooth device. Don't forget step number 3, which is what is the all important step that we never see?
The handshake.
And the pin.
The pin, yeah. So it's that, you know, it's part of the handshake where it says like, yes, I authorize you. I know you're there. And yes, we're allowed to talk. So the PIN number, very good.